Hello, my good man.
Welcome, everyone. It's time for On the Couch with Sick and Bloom.
A lot of crazy things.
Looking at fantasy football from a deeper place.
This is going to be a changing day in your life.
And now here's your host, Sick and Bloom.
But I would not moan my mother.
The OTA MVP is that more this week on the couch. Pat, you're so excited, Pat Doherty. You're so excited to answer this question. And I'm sorry, tell us, the OTA MVP is?
Yeah, you had me jumping out of my shoes where as a very good guest, I talked over the intro to the podcasts, which is what they teach you in 3-year
Podcast 101, yeah.
Yeah, where I went after college. Yeah, I was going to say, you had me, the only player that mattered all spring. We're in summer now. He still matters now. The only player that mattered all spring, apparently, was Elijah Moore of the New York Football Jets. He was the OTA's MVP running away. And, I mean, one of those ones, too, where you definitely think there's probably some substance behind the hype. Because it's weird, you know, like when you get like the 4th or 5th rounder blowing it up in shorts and T-shirts. When you get a top 35 pick who was hyped before the draft, hyped in the immediate aftermath of the draft, and then hyped even more like once he got on some cleats. You know, no pads, but he got on some shorts, maybe some compression shorts underneath his shorts, and it was just rocking out in camp. And Elijah Moore was the only player that mattered all spring.
That's a great candidate, probably the correct answer. Tell him what he's won. Really, because again, you certainly shouldn't be in the I just feel free to ignore everything that happens in OTAs and mini camps and all the news that comes out of the teams, beat writers. And certainly you have to recognize that, especially when it comes to rookies or new teams or players with new coaches or new schemes around them, that when we are enjoying, harvesting the fruits of being ahead of that situation, the first indications were in the spring. So nobody should be surprised. I mean, which rookie is be the next one to tilt fantasy leagues a la Justin Jefferson? I know that's a really high bar for Elijah Moore. I'm not really saying that. You get the point, though, even though Justin Jefferson actually had no buzz coming into the season last year, actually negative buzz.
I was creating part of the negative buzz. One of my biggest misses of like the past 5 years, I'm going off a tangent already, focused on how Justin Jefferson was used at LSU. Used in the slot, and like when I watch him, like this dude doesn't even get much separation. Like, how is he going to do this? And I totally focused on the wrong things and was disastrously wrong.
When we were talking about Justin Jefferson, Paul Charchi was on last week, and Charch is as in tune with the Vikings as anyone is with any team, basically, in our circle. And he just said Justin Jefferson, a la Elijah Moore. He said Justin Jefferson was the best player on the field at OTAs. In other words, he's just getting started, right? And made me think, Pat, that staggered my brain when the thought, because, there's the part of our brains that's our active brain, like we're driving it. And then there's the part of your brains like intuition, or I don't know, it's just another presence. Or maybe that's just me. And this is when everyone says you need to go get diagnosed or get some help. But it's something in my brain said, what if Joe Burrow was holding back Justin Jefferson?
Oh, man.
Right? And then Eric Stoner, who's a national treasure, he texted me after listening to the show and said, what if Chad Pennington was holding back Randy Moss? So
it's food for thought.
Yeah, right?
Joe Burrow, that's one of the big storylines for the season. Is Burrow arm a real thing? Or, we were already worried about Burrow arm, and now he's got the Burrow leg, the ACL. Right. And we'll see what the narrative, if the meme on Burrow arm was true, like if he actually has the arm strength or not.
Yeah. If he ends up being Chad Pennington because of injuries, then that's not horrible. Pennington had some success. But anyway, let's go back to OTAs, because actually along the same lines, and we can just do this even though it's early in the show, Pat, we can do this kind of lightning round-ish where I toss up, it's like volleyball, I'll toss up some players that were making the rounds in the news during OTAs. And you basically just kind of tell me, almost like a scale to 1 to 10, how much do you care? How much did you actually care about this? Or is you even a 0? Let's start with this other guys that were basically putting on a show in OTAs, right? T. Higgins.
I loved T. Higgins. Someone who I just love when players do what you like. He had his best case scenario rookie season, basically. And like when a guy lives up to his pre-draft billing, like immediately, obviously a super, super great sign. But then I don't know. I'm one of those people, all I do is worry. All I do is find the negative angle. So instead of like focusing on like the positivity of T. Higgins having the rookie season we wanted, having an offense where the offensive line can't possibly be worse. The quarterback is back and healthy. I worried so much about the best receiver prospect since probably Amari Cooper joining the receiver core. And he's weird because T. Higgins is going to be one of those ADP narrative journeys, isn't he? So there are going to be some people like me focusing only on the negatives, and there are going to be other people seizing on the negatives as like a value opportunity. Like his ADP is getting way too deflated. And he'll definitely be like one of those, I feel like, I don't know, I was going to say turning point player. I'm trying to think of something less dramatic. He'll be like a hinge point players in draft because some of us are going to be really right and some of us are going to be really wrong.
Yeah.
Should probably pay more attention to the fact that he was that good as a rookie and not worry about so much about who's going to be lining up opposite him. But as my worry brain, I'm kind of like out on T. Higgins this year, even though he's lighting up the spring and even though he did what I wanted as a rookie.
Yeah, I love it, Pat. Pat, I think that right now you're absolutely nailing what On the Couch is about because you're doing something. One time there's a great story where Odell Beckham's rookie year. I think it was maybe Cecil and I were doing the waiver wire show, and Beckham, he hurt his hamstring. He already missed regular season time. I want to say even was that still the Giants where I can't remember. Still the Coughlin Giants or something like that.
It was still the Coughlin Giants. He missed 4 games too.
Yeah, so it felt like Coughlin, he's not going to be all letting the wind in his hair, letting a rookie out there. And we said, yeah, probably there's nothing there with Beckham this year. And then we proceeded to talk about him for 3 or 4 minutes. We proceeded to just gush about Beckham and the talent he was. And a very smart listener said, even though y'all didn't recommend to pick him up, because you kept talking about him and the way you were talking about him, I picked him up. And the way you talked through that was, again, that active brain is like, I don't know. I'm coming up with reasons to fade T. Higgins. But at the end, you're saying, but actually, I know that if I was in my right mind, I would just pay attention to this one thing. So that's the part that's operative, right? What you said, not what you yourself are going to do or what you're going to advise yourself, Pat, but what you say, hey, Higgins almost had a 1,000-yard season as a rookie with Burrow playing about 10 games. So, and look, with the Bengals receivers, it doesn't have to be an either or proposition. We could go back to, say, the Ryan Fitzpatrick Tampa offense, Winston Tampa offense, where you can't have 2 top 12 fantasy receivers in an offense. And that doesn't even include Tyler Boyd. And I've cited this stat so many times, people probably know it by heart. 28.4 wide receiver targets per game from Joe Burrow last year. So they can all be good picks. They can all be good picks at ADP. Okay, another OTA MVP, Laviska Shenault, except he's in the dysfunctional family in Jacksonville.
Yeah, well, I always go first to the negatives. Like my first reason to fade Laviska Shenault, even though he's getting hailed, is basically like the modern day Percy Harvin, is that like Urban Meyer, it seemed like one of his off-season priorities was like finding his own Laviska Shenault instead of focusing on the one he already had on his roster. So dialed in on Kadarius Toney, and then like so dialed in on making Travis Etienne like his own Laviska Shenault. And it's weird because Urban, though, and his college teams always had at least one of those players. Oftentimes had 2 of those players. Like he loves like the slashing hybrid types. He knows how to use them, knows how to make them work. So like the red flag for me is that like he didn't seem to identify Laviska Shenault as like the guy he wanted immediately for that role, and then very aggressively sought out his own guy for that role. But I mean, Urban is one of the greatest, even if he fails an NFL coach, he's one of the greatest football coaches of all time. And if he's seeing the same things that everyone else seems to be seeing from Laviska Shenault, I'm assuming he will adjust and build a very, very featured role for Laviska Shenault. And Laviska is one of those guys, I could see it being one of those scenarios where he's both excellent, like he's better, he has a bigger role than Urban Meyer originally planned, but it's like still overdrafted just because he's one of those guys where expectations, like we can't seem to get them in line for Laviska Shenault. And I'm doing right down the middle, mealy mouthed again. But yeah, Laviska's another guy where I'll let someone else goose that ADP. I'll let someone else put that rocket fuel in Laviska Shenault, and I'm just, I'm taking some other bad player.
Sure.
Instead of betting on this enormous upside.
Well, some of it is Jacksonville, right? It's just hard to have any confidence in anything in Jacksonville because, as you said, we already have a assumption of rational coaching fork in the road for Urban Meyer that is going to inform us when we're projecting, how much work James Robinson's going to get. Like you laid out, will he accurately see what he has? Not what he wanted to have, not what he saw in the players he added, but will he see what he actually has? And that will be interesting. It could be something that flips during the season too. It could be something that evolves, or he could be really stubborn. But like you said, there's some expectation that this offense will certainly improve with Trevor Lawrence.
There's no way. I mean,
right.
Urban's like the classic situation. Like only Urban Meyer can probably stop Urban Meyer. Like, will he be a victim of his own success? Because he's clearly a genius. I mean, he just is clearly a genius. But the problem is he seems to know he's a genius. And how long will he realize? I don't know. He probably already realizes these things, but he's just he's had so much success. Will he be able to this is the NFL, whatever. I didn't recruit this guy, Laviska Shenault, but he's amazing. Right. He's on my team.
I don't remember him from high school.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he didn't know Laviska Shenault's high school coach. And he was like, he doesn't even, so anyway, we'll see.
Speaking of this, Pat, you do the rankings of head coaches every year, right? How long have you been doing this roughly?
I think since 2014.
Yeah. So it's fun.
7 or 8 years. And
it's in the off season when you have a chance to breathe. You did your head coach rankings earlier this month, right? It's still June.
Is it June? Yeah. I think I put them out in June, like June 1st or something maybe. Or no, it was like June 5th or 6th. It gets a little later every year. It's really bad.
So what did people fight with you the most on when you put out the head coach rankings this year?
By far the most. And I knew this was going to happen. I wanted to just put him a spot or two higher just to avoid this, but you can't do that. Is Joe Judge. I had him, so I ranked the returning coaches and the new coaches separately. So there are 25 head coaches. I think I had Joe Judge 23rd. And amongst many caveats in the article, I said it's probably the best the coaching has ever been. By far the deepest. There wasn't an obvious worst coach in the NFL this year. There was no Matt Patricia. Or no, there was no Adam Gase. No one that oh yeah, this guy's clearly the worst coach in the NFL. It was a pretty impressive group of coaches, all things considered, despite there being still some lemons. And Joe Judge, the write-up was largely positive. I wish people could just focus on the write-up. The rankings framework is a necessary evil because people need to click. People, you need to do the exercise too to kind of crystallize how you're thinking. But it was my spiel in Joe Judge was that I thought he was a football guy parody, but he kind of actually surprised me as a rookie head coach. And he's already shown a higher ceiling than I expected, so on and so forth. And I tried to be largely positive, but the Giants fans just seized on me having him as the third worst returning coach. And quite literally for weeks were in my mention. Carl Banks was in my Twitter mentions.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty wild. It was maybe the wildest reaction I've ever had to a coach ranking.
Every year, Pat, every iteration, every orbit we do around the sun, things change a little bit, and we just got to roll with the punches. Who was your favorite coach to, I don't want to say overrank, but that your ranking's going to be higher than consensus, or you otherwise want to cast a spotlight on that you think he's underrated?
Who do I think is underrated? Let me pull them up because this year the whole group this year, I'm serious, I was just man, this is harder than it used to be because the difference isn't as great as it was. There's still the elite tier at the top. I have Sean McDermott almost in the top 5. Is that too soon?
No.
Sean McDermott is the 6th best coach in the NFL.
Not at all. Where do you have Mike Tomlin?
I have Mike Tomlin 7th. And
whoa.
My spiel with Tomlin every year. I know you're a Steelers guy, correct?
Yeah,
Stigman?
Of course.
My deal with Mike Tomlin is that it's tough when the things that a coach are bad at are so highly visible. So Mike Tomlin not being good at game management is so highly visible. Right. His main weakness is the thing that's the easiest for the common fan to spot. Never had an under 500 record in 14 or 15 seasons. The stuff he did with essentially out a quarterback in 2019, basically with a one-armed quarterback in 2020, the way he holds the locker room, he's basically at the classic, Monday to Saturday Tomlin is as good as it gets. And Sunday Tomlin kind of undermines that. But I think that the trade-off is probably ultimately worth it for the Steelers. And I can understand it, especially being someone who's had to watch every Steelers game in your entire life. Maybe you want a change of scenery on the sidelines. But I think that's basically what it comes down to me. Like, it's almost impossible to find quibbles with Tomlin on Monday to Saturday, and you just kind of got to deal with the Sunday stuff. And but yeah, that's my Tomlin spiel.
Well, as you mentioned, it's difficult. It's a difficult job to rank them, partially because it's part of the peeking through keyholes syndrome, where we don't really know exactly what's on the head coach and what's not. We can make educated guesses, and sometimes we're right. And then, like you said, there's different parts of the job. And it may well be with someone like Tomlin, and we may see this with Belichick too, we'll see, where, they're good coaches whenever their job calls on some parts of their skill set, but then if it calls on other parts, maybe not so good. And we can see this even atomically with Belichick, like drafting wide receivers.
Yes.
That there's weak spots, there's blind spots. And then it's a question of, is the structure of your team, and some of this is like high level management where you have to manage your organization and your team so that it doesn't go to your weak spots, or delegate the same way you would coaching players and putting players in positions to succeed. I just don't know if Mike Tomlin's the guy to oversee a rebuilding process, right? I don't know if Mike Tomlin's the guy to reinvent himself if necessary, even though I love Tomlin. Tomlin's number one perennial, Pat, yes, number one, or at least top three on the coaches you'd want to have a beer with.
Yes, absolutely. Or like go to a baseball game where there's lots of like memes of
or just hang out on the block. I mean,
Yes.
I think around Pittsburgh, like folks on his block, like just hang out like with a case of beer. You know what I mean? Just he's that kind of dude.
He is. It's weird that you talk about coaches like undermining themselves. Like it's just so often in the front office, isn't it? Where like Belichick, the problems, almost all of his problems are like self-inflicted in the front office. And I think of someone too like John Gruden, who I think has actually done like a pretty decent job coaching on Sundays the past 3 years. Like he knew, I feel like he made the transition. Like he was perfectly fine, like implementing his system in these modern times, even though it had been 12 or 13 years, like it's still highly, highly efficient offense. And just the way that he just disastrously hamstrings himself in the front office totally undermined the whole thing, made it, it's like a tire fire basically. And just wondering how much different the John Gruden comeback could have been if he was just strictly coaching and not building his roster. And just to continue talking and stealing the microphone, someone I like who you asked, like who did I think maybe I had a little too high? I probably didn't have him a little too high, but I have Mike Vrabel at 14th. And I kind of suspect that that's too low for Mike Vrabel. So he's a defensive-minded head coach who he's already gotten two offensive coordinators head coaching jobs. Like he's not overthinking he's built a successful offense with Ryan Tannehill. He's doing the classic, like using his personnel the way it needs to be used. Like so little defensive talent last year, but they never like went fully off the rails. I just feel like if he can get slightly more talent on defense, I feel like he's got his side of the ball figured out, despite the Titans defense, not being great like the last year, especially. He just seems like someone who figures things out to me. Mike Vrabel has made a lot of lemonade out of lemons, basically, his first 3 years. And he's someone I'm excited to keep following, in addition to the really obvious ones, of course, like Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, so on and so forth.
Yeah, low key, Pat, low key in the playoffs. Like, wouldn't it be fun to see Tennessee with Julio make a run? Wouldn't it be fun to see this team maybe get to a Super Bowl? This particular makeup, this team. And it really harkens back to the Jeff Fisher, Bill Cowher days. We're stuck in a loop, right? Watching Vlad Guerrero Jr. hit a home run and having to rub your eyes and say, wait a second. Like we're just on a return cycle, eternal return, right? Because like Fisher and Cowher, you have these coaches, like you said, Monday through Saturday are getting everybody to pull in the same direction, being a leader of men, setting the tone, saying this is how we win football games. This is what our identity is. But at the same time being kind of rigid. And that was always the heartbreak of watching these teams. Maybe not so much Fisher. I won't speak for the Titans fans, but certainly the Bill Cowher Steelers were predictable. And they were saying, well, if you can stop it, if you can keep us from imposing our will, then good on you. And that's just not the NFL anymore. That's just not how to win in the NFL anymore.
No.
And you see it, Pat, you even see it in the hiring, right? Like promoting from within, always promoting from within, right?
Let's just system.
Right, exactly. That's what these teams are about, and we'll see. But Vrabel, it's funny too, because Vrabel and Tomlin were the two coaches that basically took away, and LaFleur to an extent, took away a chance to win the game from their offense.
People always talk about EV, with Mike Vrabel especially. Like, always with Mike Vrabel, like, why is he running so much? And I can make like the obvious, like, old school football counterpoint.
Right.
Well, like, look how scared defenses are of Derrick Henry. They're selling
Right.
out to stop Derrick Henry in a way you basically just don't see for running backs anymore. And I really just think, what is EV when Ryan Tannehill is your quarterback? Is kind of the way I look at it. And or I kind of give Vrabel a pass. I'm like, I don't usually think this way. I don't ever think, well, this guy just knows more than me. I tend to give Mike Vrabel a pass. I think Mike Vrabel probably knows what he's doing with this personnel group better than I could on the outside. And it might seem obvious, but I just, that's a question I ponder with Mike Vrabel. Like, what even is EV when Ryan Tannehill is your quarterback? And it's probably just not. It's one situation where I feel like you get a dispensation from doing things like the way that the analytics say you should. And I'm not a thinker that way, like writ large with the modern NFL. Like, EV is like a very real thing and all that, and like play sequencing and all that. But I just think it's a lot different when you've got like a spare parts quarterback like Ryan Tannehill, and then one of the only running backs of the modern era that opposing defenses like actually feel the need to game plan for.
Yeah, and look, there's other things we can cast the spotlight on here, like Tennessee not really having a defensive coordinator last year. That didn't.
No, that was weird.
Right? So, and the Steelers, I think that Mike Tomlin, oftentimes they've said there hasn't really been a lot of bloodletting on the defensive side of the ball for the Steelers, because then that basically would mean Tomlin. And the weakest part of the defense is the secondary. And that's, I think, where Tomlin's most involved. Anyway. We don't have to turn this into a Steelers-Titans neurosis show, but head coach rankings are fun. All of these kinds of off-season topics are fun. What about training camp? And look, by the way, folks, subscribe to Football Guys, and Pat Doherty, Roto Pat from NBC Sports Edge, still very much a part of everybody's fantasy football and all sports preparation routine. And we take a little break here for a couple of weeks. The whole NFL does. I feel like, Pat, when the NFL exhales, especially because of the nature of our jobs, we should too. And don't think there'll be a couch until we get closer to training camp. But on that note, because before we know it, there'll be the fishbowl draft to keep us all busy, 4th of July, et cetera. And then training camps, most of them open on July 27th. There's a few teams that can start early because of the Hall of Fame game and starting the season on a Thursday. Anyway, what are you looking forward to? Like, if you could go to a few training camps, or you could get to sit down and be a fly on the wall and get access that most of us aren't going to get, to help guide you to how we're going to advise people this year in fantasy football. What camps do you want to drop on? I
feel like the biggest one by far this year has to be the Saints, does it not? It's weird. So, the Jameis Winston versus Taysom Hill debate is so interesting. Like, the guy who one of the guys who ushered in the efficiency era, like kind of the completions at all cost era of offensive football, with Drew Brees, Sean Payton. Well, not to make the Sean Payton's only passing, as we know the Saints have their most success is when they're really balanced. But Sean Payton at the vanguard of like efficiency, completions based passing off, or just like hit the layups over and over and over again. I'm always the caveat guy. Not that they aren't taking deep shots. There used to literally be the Devery Henderson role, of course. But how does he move on from that hyper-efficient passing attack when the quarterback's either Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston, two totally different guys, both totally different from Drew Brees in their own right, and then totally different from each other. Like, it's the most fascinating positional battle I feel like I've seen in a long time. But I also have like the sneaking suspicion where it's not even really going to be a positional battle at all. And like, he's already made up his mind to go maybe kind of like a college approach. Because like the one thing I feel like I know for sure about the Saints quarterback battle is that Taysom Hill's role will not be getting smaller. Like, if you have that much faith in Taysom Hill when Drew Brees is the quarterback, I don't think you're going to like lose faith in Taysom Hill when Jameis Winston is the quarterback. Maybe he's lost a little faith after actually seeing the extended cameo of Taysom as a passer. But I kind of feel like we could see like the jumbo version of what Sean Payton had already been doing, where it's like Jameis Winston mostly handling the business between the 20s, but then like almost every play, Taysom Hill in the red zone, and maybe like a true like ACC style, like quarterback, like piggyback thing where they're playing in tandem, like a true 2 quarterback system. So that's just the number one thing I'm most fascinated about heading into training camp is just what in the world like quarterback guru Sean Payton is going to do a quarterback.
Yeah, I think they announced locations for training camps yet. It's another thing we're still waiting on.
Are they going to the Greenbrier again? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know, right? Because otherwise, just right down like Airline Highway here in New Orleans, and can check it out. What I wonder, I almost started a poll on this today, Pat, but I mean, I'm thinking about the Euro 2020 and the Stanley Cup Finals, NBA semis. Like, there's a lot of
math, yeah, you know.
Maybe I'll revisit this like in a month, and I'll post this on the occasion of these camps opening. Is Drew Brees' retirement good or bad for the Saints offense? I think you can make an argument that it's good. I think you can. Make the joke, my wife who's a diehard Saints fan, when they put the thanks Drew signs around New Orleans. Thanks for retiring so that the team can move forward, so the offense can move forward. Thanks, Drew. Thank you for finally stepping aside. Which side of this debate would you fall on?
Probably good. I mean, because he was just getting a little more diminished with each injury. Where like he was still effective in 2019. After it was his hand, right? He hit his hand on a helmet in 2019, and he was still reasonably effective, but it just wasn't the same, when he came back. And it was good for a little while, but then like the big, you lose to the Vikings at home in the playoffs, like that's not supposed to happen to the New Orleans Saints, and like he could still like hit. So it was basically like only layups. Like the Devery Henderson role had disappeared. There was no Ted Ginn even in 2020. Right. And there was just nothing other than the layups over. And without Michael Thomas, a lot of the layups were even like super low quality. And yeah, they had gotten stuck in a rut. And like the only backup plan seemed to be like Taysom Hill wildcatting. And that's fine. Maybe there's still more to do with that. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy, he could complete 75% of his passes in his sleep, but there was no variation anymore, basically. And age 42, you break 19 ribs or whatever. I guess you just don't come back from that the same way. And he probably did hold on. It was tough to say he held on a year or two too long because he was still like doing what he was paid to do and like completing an astonishingly high percentage of his passes. But yet like the upside had just been totally hollowed out. And I agree. It was probably a good thing just to shake up the thinking, and because they had been like executing this system for 15 years, and they'd perfected the system. They had made subtle variations to the system, but it had very much been taken to the limit, especially with 42-year-old Drew Brees. Yeah,
you could see the limit. You could really see it during games when he was at or going beyond his limit. And the defenses were compressing closer and closer. The same thing happened to Roethlisberger last year.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's the exact same thing that happened.
Yeah, defenses compress closer and closer to the line of scrimmage. You become more predictable. Everyone remembers the Jared Cook fumble in the playoff loss to the Bucs, but there were a couple of Brees unforced errors before that all those together, they make up. I mean, Brees can still execute, but hopefully Sean Payton can help Jameis Winston execute. And I don't know if it really was given the attention it deserved, and I don't know how much we should trust it, but there was that item. I can't remember who it was, Pat, that said, hey, people don't understand how close the Saints were, how much the Saints were in on Brady. And I think it really was a decision of the way it was framed is that, well, you weren't just going to have Brady for this year, but you were going to have probably Brady for the next few years, the next era. You wouldn't just be turning the page like the Colts did with Rivers, although I saw something today that they were expecting Rivers to play 2 years, and it kind of surprised them that he retired after last year. Anyway, they took advantage of that opportunity, and Sean Payton had a plan in mind for after Brees, regardless, whether it was Brady or not. Maybe New Orleans would be celebrating a Super Bowl if he had done it, though. Ooh, as a Steelers,
that was like the deepest roster in the NFL, and now it is very, very much not the deepest roster in the NFL right now.
No. Yeah, so it'll be something to look forward to. A lot of things to look forward to. I suppose another area that will be breathlessly reported every day, Pat, rookie quarterbacks. Do you have any strong takes on rookie quarterbacks? Because as we're doing best ball drafts, as we're prepping, planting our flags and things like that, how we forecast these rookie quarterback situations to go greatly affects the projection of a lot of players. And what do you think? Is there anything standing out to you as we look forward to Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and their battles to be the starter?
I mean, we're trained to never believe like anything coaches say, of course, when it comes to rookie quarterback situations. So they're always going to say, oh, they're not going to start week one. But my take might be that Trey Lance might not actually start week one, even though like the scuttlebutt is the 49ers think not only was the best quarterback, but he was the smartest quarterback in the draft. So you think he'd be someone who ready right off the bat to handle an NFL offense. But I just keep coming back to the fact that he's played one game in 2 years, and it was an exhibition against Central Arkansas. And I maybe believe the 49ers, where they're not just going to throw Trey Lance right into the fire and make him the week 1 starter, and we'll actually see like a decent amount of Jimmy Garoppolo starts. That's like my rookie quarterback take, where the one situation where I'm actually maybe believing the coach speak is San Francisco. Because how could the guy be ready? This is kind of how I look at it.
Sure.
Seriously, one game in 2 years. It was Central Arkansas. It's crazy. It'd be like almost unprecedented. But I mean, they had enough faith to invest the number 3 overall pick, and you still always lean towards the team starting the rookie quarterback. But San Francisco's one where I would actually maybe believe that we're not going to see the quarterback immediately. Chicago, I'm not buying it at all. I mean, I guess you can look at it one of two ways. Like Matt Nagy's trying to save his job, so he'll ride the veteran as long as possible. I think it will be the other way, where he's trying to save his job, and he's going to just go to the rookie as soon as he has any excuse, and that excuse could come in training camp. And so I'm not believing anything the Bears say about their quarterback competition, but I think it makes like a little too much sense of the 49ers, and that Trey Lance actually will begin the year on the bench.
Yeah, and I would say that if you read in San Francisco what they're saying, it's that Garoppolo's the starter, and hey, if Lance makes a case to be the starter, the coaches are open to that. The coaches are open to, in training camp and preseason, being overwhelmed and saying, well, I guess we just have to start Lance. But they're comfortable starting Garoppolo until they feel like Lance is ready. It's hard to tell, like you said, with the Bears. I think it's good to be more skeptical of what they're saying because they're so rigidly saying Dalton's the number one.
It's too over the top.
You're overselling it. Yeah.
Goff protesting too much for sure.
Yes. Of course, first team reps are important, even though, as I always mentioned, Deshaun Watson didn't get any first team reps the year that he took over because, well, Tom Savage was ahead of him.
It's something.
And it's a question of whether these teams, the Bears and 49ers, who have good defenses, 49ers have a great running game. Bears running game improving. Can they win in spite of their quarterbacks? Are the coaches smart enough to figure that out? Because you have a couple of elements when you're forecasting this. One is psychoanalyzing the coach and figuring out what their framework is going to be for the decision. But then there's reality, and whether reality is just going to shout at them, whether it be fan reaction, media, or just what happens on the field to show them that they don't have a choice. What about New England? You didn't mention New England.
That one, maybe I didn't mention it because, like, I genuinely don't know what's going to happen there. Where, like, Bill Belichick is so inscrutable. We haven't seen this situation ever in New England with Bill Belichick, where he's never been in this dilemma before. Like, do I actually play the rookie? And I feel like Bill probably genuinely has not decided, but I think that Cam Newton's shoulder just decided 2 years ago, and that will be. I mean, Cam, they clearly love Cam, and understandably so. I mean, one of the guttiest like seasons you'll ever see was Cam Newton last year. Like, no weapons, his shoulders basically just like falling off his body, and he's in his 30s and he's still running, being used like he's a 22-year-old running quarterback instead of like a 32-year-old running quarterback. But I mean, we all saw the same. The arm is just totally shot, and even if Bill Belichick is trying to keep an open mind about Cam, maybe doing some deferring to the veteran, I just don't see how that's going to be a realistic option by the end of Patriots camp, unless Mac Jones stinks up the joint or whatever, because he'll be comfortable doing last year's like Stone Age offensive approach. He's already done it 1 year. I mean, so why not do it a little bit longer? But I feel like Cam's shoulder is just going to make the decision for Bill, and that it will be Mac Jones.
I would say that's the direction I would go, and you can bet on these things. You can bet on everything.
You can bet on everything in this country now, folks.
Yeah. It's right. It's the future. You can bet on these things, and I think Mac Jones is smart money here. Although the story already in OTAs, Pat, has been compelling, right? Because first, Cam Newton spraying the ball over the place, Mac Jones just making football plays against air. But the contrast was stark. You know, Mac Jones executing with rhythm and pace and accuracy, and Cam Newton looking like a quarterback who's the game was passed him by. And then apparently on the last day of OTAs, Cam Newton rallies and looks like vintage Cam Newton for a day and leaves everyone with, I don't know.
It's kind of Cam in a nutshell last year.
Right.
Like, you'd see that for like a half where he's just like old warhorse Cam.
Right.
And so I guess that's not surprising, really.
Well, the game against Seattle until that Ravens-Browns game was the game of the year.
It was.
And he was as good as I saw him in any game in his career in that game. It could be COVID. There's some other things to watch. You mentioned the idea of Trey Lance only playing one game since 2019. Some of these players who took off 2020, whether it be some pros coming back like Dante Hightower, or some of the college players who were drafted very high, even like Jamar Chase. So it'll be interesting. We'll get more data points, and that's one of the things we like. Just continuing to feed it in and inform the next decision as we guide people through this thing. It's funny, Pat, because we've both been doing this for a while, and I think the folks that like your work and like my work, I don't think they're coming for our groundbreaking 5-word title analytical ways to break down fantasy football now.
No, we're not those people. And there's a lot of people that are great at that, but we will never be that.
Stay in your
especially
lane,
me, especially me. I'm like to a fault, like seeing both sides. Only in sports.
Sure.
I don't see both sides in a lot of things in American society. Only in sports.
Yes.
I had, by the way, when you were talking, the factoid, I was like, how insane is it that Julian Edelman's career high for yardage came in his fifth final game with Cam Newton at quarterback? What an insane, weird sports stat.
Right, with his knee held together by rubber bands or something. Yeah, that was wild. It was, an image that certainly we'll be left with. And we've talked, look, folks, and I appreciate everybody's great loyalty to all the things we do in the fantasy space. We've been talking about fantasy football. I put out my best ball guide. I'll give you a lot of content before I head on vacation. However, Pat, some people might wonder, why were we a little bit late starting today, even though the scheduled time, or it's just what's on our mind. And for some of you, I apologize if this is the part, the off ramp, but I want to talk about it. Speaking of lasting images, I want to talk about it because I'm captivated, Pat. I don't remember exactly when it was that I really, growing up, March Madness, I think, was my first true love as a sports fan. Maybe 7 years old, 8 years old, the NC State 83 run. And I think what it was in hindsight was a tournament where every game is life or death. Every game could be the last game for that team. And what you hope it brings out, it summons up, is crowd energy, performances, team performances, something that's befitting of, well, this is what you'll be remembered for. Whether you win or lose, this is how you'll be remembered. And it's final. It's of record. And watching, I don't know, it was the first World Cup here. I remember watching the World Cup 90 and rooting for Cameroon to beat England. Congratulations, England, today, by the way. They actually went ahead in extra time in that game. I think it was Lineker scoring 2 goals, maybe. My brain gets fuzzy. But there's something about these big soccer tournaments, especially the World Cup, of course, and the Euro, that to me are just captivating because I think it is the mortality and also the shared national identity that comes together with players that don't usually play together, right? That's the other thing, is you're representing your country. In some ways, you transmit the national character of the country. You truly represent your country. But in some of these teams, Pat, you can even see like the history of the country, like countries that they colonized and things like that through the rosters.
Yes.
And then you shake them up. And this year they're playing in 11 different countries. So you've had the backgrounds, like today, England winning in Wembley Stadium against Germany, what Denmark has done in Copenhagen, what Hungary did earlier against France in Budapest. I mean, these are things because you feel the energy, the immense amount of energy, of affection, of what's going on. So I've got to ask you, because I know that I almost accidentally scheduled us over the England-Germany game.
I wasn't going to say anything, but then you did.
I'm glad you didn't. How did you find yourself caring about what happens in international soccer?
Well, there's just nothing like it. Like, it's the only truly global sport. Like all the sports that America dominates, like basketball is finally kind of rising to the level where we're going to get like true national competition, like every 4 years, like where it's no longer just like an American walkover.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's weird. It's like, first off, with international sports, you get somewhere like healthy to like funnel your tribalism, somewhere like fun, where it's more about kind of being like united and like somewhere healthy to direct like your nationalistic energies instead of like awful political policies. And it's like the one soccer, like every pocket of the globe has like some competitive teams. So it's the one like truly global international tournament. Like you said, it's weird. Like so many things are like, it's so loaded with subtext. And it's like hard not to bring your own neuroses to it too. Like, but like with England, I was thinking like last week or England was playing, I guess Scotland. And I'm like, I was thinking of the amount of teams England could play where the game like wouldn't be like dripping with subtext, and it's like 3 teams in the entire world.
Right.
Like,
well, it's kind of like English history, English world history, right? Like, where's there somewhere on the globe that England doesn't figure into the story of that place?
Like everywhere I could play England and have like some awful colonial history with them, or like beating them in a war, or like lost to them in a war. And it's a really weird in that where it's like this the only like one of the only sports you can kind of apply that lens to it too. And I just love it. I think the reason I love soccer in general is it's the most similar to me. This is like a weird comparison. It's the most similar sport to me to American college football, or it's like the only sport where you get like fiercely like region based even though there's like regional fandom in every sport, like
right.
It's so tied up in regional identity, international soccer and like college football. There's like that aspect where it's like the teams can't move, you know? So like, it's like truly your team. It's based on the geography. The stakes are like so civilizational. Like you just see, I feel like in college football and soccer, you see so many crazy things because like the stakes are like as high for like the players and the fans. Like for different reasons, they want it like so badly. And like when the stakes are that high, you get so many memorable moments. You get so many like inexplicable things. And I'm just like basically a meandering rant's not the right word, just babbling. But it's just all international sports are so cool, and it's the one international sport that's like truly, truly, truly global. And you just see such crazy stuff in those scenarios.
Yeah, extraordinary things. Yesterday was something that had happened once before ever in the Euro Championship happened twice. Teams coming back from 2 goals down with 10 minutes left. And it's unfair. One of the things I actually kind of like, or it creates more suspense and drama, is that you have a game, and no game that we follow, even hockey isn't as bad as this, where you have a game where you're winning a certain percentage of the plays for your team. But what actually determines the game is one or maybe 2 things. And it can be bad luck. It can be a missed call by a referee. It can be something that has nothing to do with whether you've actually been the better team. You can be the clearly better team. You can possess the ball for the whole game and lose, and it's unfair, right? But Pat, I think that's kind of how life is, right? Like your life is going to come down to 4 or 5 pivotal moments, even though you're showing up for your life every day. So
sometimes your goalie just misses a back pass for some reason.
Right, in life.
Yeah.
In life.
I just too, thinking about why I love, like, it's so easy to just like project, I feel like, my own neuroses and feelings on it. Like with America, I'm like, is this American decline? Like our team, you know, we can never like get over the hump. Like, it's like so easily, I like in like mostly probably healthy ways to like wrap up the identity of your team with your country. And it's just such a strange meld. And it's just like, you can't like look away from it basically.
Yeah, well, in America, we're going to identify with whoever's winning. Like you said, the dream team in basketball. Like that's who we're going to identify with. When we had the plucky hockey underdog team in 1980.
That was cool.
That because it was something we had no business winning. It was a bunch of amateurs against the Soviet machine. And with soccer, I just think it comes back to the development of athletes in our country and where the best athletes end up, right? This is where you write the article, Pat, of put together a starting 11 with NFL players. Like, who are you going to pick to be the goalie? Who are you going to pick to be your front line and your defenders and things like that? If we could just deploy those guys in the World Cup, maybe it would be different. I don't know. It's been fun to watch that. And then, of course, we also have coming up, and I asked this when I was on another show recently, why don't we do fantasy Olympics? We can bet on everything. Can you bet on the Olympics? You mentioned international sports competition happening, just periodically every 4 years, every 5 years. We've been waiting for these competitions. Are you interested in the Olympics coming up in Tokyo?
I am, and I work for NBC, so it's very good that I am.
Oh, there you go.
So but
on NBC, on all your NBC platforms, exactly. Peacock, on your mobile devices.
Exactly. Watch the Olympics on Peacock, folks. But I mean, I'm just like you. Like I basically watch like sports are happening, I can't not watch them.
Right.
Especially with the international stakes. Like I love the Olympics, and cause like, there's the stakes just do not get higher. Like
Right.
some of the stuff is like country based, like stakes don't get higher for your country, but then you could like throw on, any random event. And like the stakes are just so high for this Belarusian like weightlifter. They've spent their entire life building towards this money. You can like see it on their faces, like how much weight they're carrying on their shoulders, and just this. And you get such a great mixture of like team based drama, but like individual drama that you normally only get from like one or two golf tournaments or a few tennis tournaments that rise to that level every year, or you get that like every hour in the Olympics. Like this, seeing athletes doing crazy physical feats, but also like clearly just gaming out so many things in their head. There's so much pressure, so much competing against yourself. Where the Olympics, there's just like nothing like the mix of like, getting like team rooting interest, national rooting interest, and this compelling like individual story. Like NBC, we get made fun of for like doing all of like the, like the pre-packaged like story, but they're all so amazing. You can do it like every athlete. They all have such insane journeys. Yeah, I just love the Olympics for such a unique, swirling mixture of drama.
Yes, it's epic. It's similar to these international soccer competitions in the sense that there's so much energy, there's so much culmination in these moments that it creates an epic cinematic scope to the events that happen. And the Criterion Collection. If you don't know the Criterion Collection, make it part of your life. The Criterion Collection is wonderful. Criterion Collection is just be in circulation. Things from the Criterion Collection in your life. Films, great films. There's the collection of all the films. My wife and I watched every one we could watch except for the really old ones. Maybe, I don't know, we should probably go back and watch those too. There are these films that are made, and you can tell that they're made by the international filmmaking group of the country that hosted the Olympics. And it makes it interesting because each one is different based on their attitude or who they're even emulating. I want to say one from Japan, like in 1964 or something like that, was like, hey, you could tell it was Hitchcockian. They were really into Hitchcock and noir, so the Olympics are covered in this noir, Hitchcockian, suspenseful feeling and so on.
In an alley, everyone has a cigarette.
Right.
In the Olympics.
In the 70s, you see it turn like futuristic. I want to say the Montreal one that we watched was very futuristic. It was very much about like the future is here. And it kept focusing on like different, technical equipment they had, like the first video screens or something like a video screen and so on. They're really fantastic though, because as you point out, it's people, the Olympics, and I want to get people excited to watch the Olympics coming up. If you weren't excited to watch the Olympics, I want to try to get you excited to watch the Olympics, okay? It's people at the very limits of themselves. And that's not just athletically. It's not just athletically. And like you said, it's the human interest stories. And in these, you'll get these incredible the Bud Greenspan ones whenever he took over making some of these. I think they call it like stories of glory or something glory, right? But you hear these stories like, there was this skier, I don't remember which Olympics it was, 98 or 2000 or something, Janica Kostelic from Croatia, who was the best skier, the best female skier. I think she was only like 19 or 20. She had a bunch of injuries, here's some fantasy football stuff for like coming back from knee surgery and things like that. But the thing is, if you think about it, Pat, right, when you think alpine skiing, you don't think Croatia. There isn't really alpine skiing in Croatia. Right? But her dad actually was training her and her brother, with this intense, like almost like Rocky, but out in the forest, like hanging off of branches and scuttling up trees and jumping over creeks and things like that. Wrestling bears. Okay, maybe not wrestling bears, but and they had this intense training regime. And also there was this whole layer to it that it was like brother and sister coming up together. They were almost like two aspects of one human energy. And they lived in their car at times because all of their resources went to training them to be world-class alpine skiers, even though they lived in a country where there weren't even alpine ski slopes for them to train on. And she is the greatest. It culminates in this performance where I think she wins the first race kind of as a surprise. And then every successive race, she just keeps either winning or coming in second, she's out of her mind. And it shows you the culmination of a lifetime. All of these stories are the culmination of a lifetime. And it really is like a mythological human story of us against our limits. It's something that resonates through mythology going back thousands of years. I mean, the Olympics, right? The Olympics is an ancient
True.
sporting event, right? So it's just an eternal expression of us against our limits. And Pat, I think that's kind of what we do with fantasy football, right? We're trying to fantasy the limits of our knowledge, our ability to predict the future.
Definitely the limits of our knowledge. You hinted at another reason the Olympics are great too. There's also that added element always of like family psychodrama.
Yes.
So often, like their coach is like their dad or their mom.
Right.
And always, like they've never not been doing the sport since they were like 2 or 3.
There's just no other way you end up in the Olympics.
Yeah,
you have to give over your life to it, and other people have to give over their life to it too, not just you. It's not that much different than how someone ends up being a professional football player, really.
No, but it's just weird because it's outside the team context so often. So yeah, it's like you have to be so inside your own head, and there's just nothing else like it.
Yeah, there really isn't, and it ends up in dark places too. That's the other side.
That's the sad part.
You remember Jerry Rice? I think it was in his Hall of Fame speech when he said he was miserable because he just lived with this fear of failure, like this constant fear of failure. It was probably a big reason he succeeded. Like Michael Phelps. You're gonna say who's the greatest American Olympian of all time? Is it Michael Phelps? I think it's probably Michael
Phelps.
He was at a certain point where he was going to retire, even to the point where he was saying, "I'm not going to even go in a swimming pool again when I'm done." And then he came back for another Olympics. He thought, well, what's that? How do you trace that trajectory? He seems better now. He seems like Aaron Rodgers, right? Like they both kind of like exhaled and relaxed a little bit from the intense stress of being who they are and where they are. But there's a documentary out there, I can't remember the name of it, about U.S. Olympic athletes and just the depression and the harsh lives that some of them experience because of the lonely nature of it and how singular your focus has to be.
Yeah, we all struggle with that in America, like separating our identities from our jobs, and like there's no choice if you're an Olympian. Like if there's completely synonymous, completely one and the same. And yeah, that seems like lots of mental struggles, understandably so, because like if your job is your life and your life is your job, like there's where's the escape? And
right.
We struggle with that.
Who are you?
In general as the country, though. Like, it's so hard to, like, separate our identities from our job. My name is, I present myself as Roto-Pat.
Right, you're Roto-Pat now. Yeah, you're Roto-Pat. Little did you know when you chose that handle that you were going to become Roto-Pat.
I didn't know I was going to become, like, a Neymar when I did that. Become a one-name person to the people I know in the industry. It's very interesting.
Well, if the shoes fit, right?
It's true. I've tried to embrace it. The only reason I ever did Roto-Pat is because Patrick Daugherty is too many characters. It doesn't fit in the Twitter username, and I had to do something. And I've never like loved it. To me, it's like weird. It's way too like corny or like kitschy. But I've tried to just embrace it because it was called. It's a mononym, right? Is that when you get one? Yeah. I mean, I've got a mononym. There are worse things in the world.
Yeah, there are worse things in the world. One of the other things. Go back to the Olympics, since I was being so depressing about it. The dark side of it is one of the other things I learned not that long ago is that when they're not competing, you probably heard this, Pat. There's a lot of sex.
Yes. Well, there was a trend story for several Olympics in a row. I think they were like running out of condoms in the Olympic Village.
Yeah, I think they broke some of the apps, like the hookup apps. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you got to have some sort of release. For this, and appears they choose the sex.
I can't remember which one it was of those films. I think maybe Mexico City. I can't remember, but they kind of hint at that. There's like some innuendo about at the Olympic Village, the athletes.
Well, it was Mexico City. I think it was 68 too, right? And that's when that it was just exploding around the world. We were kind of becoming comfortable with our bodies. And
sure.
So, yeah, maybe the only Olympic film, where they would hint at that. That was like the 3-year period where it wasn't taboo. You could hint at it even in an Olympic film.
Yeah. Well, in case where I'm going to take a break, Pat, are you anything that allows you to take a breather one last before the marathon is on, when training camp start, and we take this thing all the way to the Super Bowl?
Like, what do I do to you say? What do I do for like an
reset.
Extended break or try to reset?
just yeah.
Well, I'm going to go to South Texas. That's my wife's family. She has aunt and uncle and a grandmother who live in South Texas. And the end of July, basically every year, I go down to first McAllen, Texas. Then we go to South Padre Island.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically my favorite week of the year because it's a resort town. It's like a beach town, but it's a very low key, relaxed one. It's not like overflowing with tourists. And it's become like my favorite part of the year. And definitely, it's like a cliche level reset where I go down there, just go to the beach, eat breakfast tacos every day.
Yes.
Email barely works. And it's like a reset in like every form of the word. And that will be how I am resetting for the 22. Because this off season, I don't know, it seems short as hell to me. I don't know why. Maybe after the year of nothing happening, like things happening again has like made the off season like fly by for me. But I feel like I haven't had a break. So I desperately need to get to South Padre Island, Texas.
And it's a beautiful place. I mean, along the Gulf Coast, especially along the Texas Gulf Coast, it's about as good as it gets. And down in the valley, a few folks from down in the valley, you have a unique border culture. My wife's from El Paso. I grew up in New Mexico for part of my childhood. And also, you get down to South Texas, and it's a place maybe where the modern world hasn't totally engulfed it yet.
Oh, yeah, it's still got its own regional flavor for sure.
Yeah. Well, and we're old enough now, Pat, that we can say, I can remember when I was a kid. Yeah. In some places it's still like that, or there's at least little pockets and places, businesses, whatever, restaurants, bars, or just communities that are still keeping it real. And I guess we have a game to watch. So we're going to get back to it. So for our Swedish friends, our Ukrainian friends out there, it's great. And then, hey, that's another thing with international soccer is it can get you back in touch with your roots. And we always get in touch with a lot of things. We get to talk to Pat Doherty, NBC Edge. And again, take a deep breath, folks. I know this football season can dominate our lives more than we realize. Spend time with our families, get in touch with some of the other things that make us who we are other than our love of football and our ability to predict the future. So thank you, folks, again. Football Guys, open for business. And we want to help you with all of your fantasy football needs this year. So take a little breather. I'll still be around, still be checking in with the Fishbowl draft. And so are you in the Fishbowl, Pat?
I am. I'm looking forward to it.
Which division are you in?
I'll do a quick plug. We had Scott Fish on the NBC Sports Edge podcast on Monday.
Sweet.
It was a very fascinating, like Scott Fishbowl primer, but also just like fantasy football settings and strategy talk. It was great. I am in the No Doubt division. Sigmund.
Oh, did you pick the No Doubt division, or you just let fate drop?
I picked it because someone wanted to be in a division with me, and he said the No Doubt and Paramore divisions had no one in them yet.
That's great.
So we chose No Doubt. If I could have chosen my own division, I might have chosen like the Pavement division, but that didn't even exist. So I'm in the No Doubt.
We could have started a movement for that.
We could have. You and I could probably add a lot of divisions that aren't in there. Like I think you and I would bring different divisions. We both. Feel like we're like rockists and like I'm an indie rock lifer. I wouldn't say you're a rock lifer. You're just a music lifer. And they should let us choose the band divisions next year.
Yeah, there could just be the whole indie rock conference, and it's certainly dad rock. It's funny though. I like this. See, this is where I'm going to get Scott Fish. You gave me an idea because I have to get Scott Fish on the couch to talk Fishbowl since it's coming up. Like which divisions were the places like, let's meet up in a place, a nice quiet bar where it's not going to be too busy.
Yes, that was the No Doubt one.
No doubt. Anyway, it's great, folks. So let's bond over everything we can, but especially football. So we got a long way to go together and we enjoy every minute with you as always because get a record player, start a record club, because it's the ritual. It's marrying music back to ritual. And whenever you take your record out and you handle it very gently because it's a precious thing and you put it on the record and the sound of the needle going on the record, we all know what that means, how that prompts you. You're old enough to remember it. And it's a moment in your life when you slow down and you make yourself ready to receive something.
Did you just call Snapple crack?